All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I think we're going to let some folks file in, but while we do, just a little bit of housekeeping. This is being recorded. It will be available and shared with you and anyone you want to share it with in a few days. All attendees are going to be on mute for the Q&A today, but we do want this to be interactive if you have any questions. So at any time, feel free to enter any questions you might have in the Q&A box that should be at the bottom or side of your screen. So I think we've got a quorum here, so we can go ahead and get started. We'll start with a little bit in the way of introductions. My name is Marcus Owens. I'm a lead solution consultant at Amperity. Joining me today is Anthony Kuykendall. He's a senior trading specialist at the Trade Desk. Anthony, welcome if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be here today.
Great. Well, as you can tell, Anthony and I really excited to be here, kind of nerding out a little bit on media measurement and kind of the importance of a truly holistic measurement strategy. If you joined us last week for our webinar on omni-channel measurement, you know this is a topic that Amperity and the Trade Desk is really passionate about. So today, we're really happy to have each other together, dive a little bit deeper into enabling that person-level measurement. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we mean when we say person level. Using Trade Desk's raw event data stream. And we'll talk about some of the wins we've had with some of our joint accounts in terms of bringing this data to bear in terms of improving the campaign quality and execution for our customers. And then we'll also take you through a walkthrough of the integration in action in Amperity, showing the capabilities and the impact that it's had. So let's start off with a little bit of a Q&A. Anthony, I'm going to give you a little bit of 20 questions here since you're the resident expert we have with us today. So let's talk about attribution. Let's talk about traditional methods of attribution and specifically where are we seeing that fall short in today's media landscape?
Yeah, I think that kind of manifests itself in two different ways, right? So when we think about traditional attribution, maybe we're thinking about a pixel, something that happens on the brand website, but we're finding more and more the tangible business results aren't just taking place on a website. You think about maybe a company in the travel vertical, for instance, right? There are all sorts of third-party booking websites that are still driving value for your brand, but because it doesn't happen on your specific brand site with your specific brand's pixels, you might be losing some visibility into that data through traditional pixeling methods. In addition to that, right, and just to like maybe a quick primer on different attribution methods, you might hear this concept of last touch attribution, meaning that the full credit of the conversion goes towards the last impression or click on a user journey. But when your media buys are across multiple channels and multiple platforms, potentially, it becomes more difficult to justify assigning conversion credit just to one single touch along the way. If you were to serve 3 connected TV ads and then the last ad before someone converts is a display ad, you wouldn't necessarily want that CTV ad to get no credit in the user journey. So I'd say really getting a more complete picture of the user journey, whether it happens on the site or not, when it's driving impact for your business, are kind of like two of the main challenges I see in the industry here.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. You know, you mentioned a really specific, an interesting specific example, and that is travel. Something that comes to mind there is especially like offsite booking, right? I might see an advertisement for a hotel, and I might see a really good deal on one of those online travel agencies, right? So actually see that with our hotel customers, right? And if you're an Amperity customer, you're familiar with what we do from a Stitch identity resolution perspective, right? In many cases, we're able to bring that traffic together. So we'll talk about how we use Amperity plus what we're seeing from Trade Desk and the raw events data feed in a moment. But that's a really interesting particular application there. Thinking backwards, you know, both of us we've been around the ad tech industry for a while, at least since the first time the cookie was supposed to disappear. Let's hit that way back button a little bit and talk about, you mentioned last touch attribution. How has this been done historically? Like, and then what is the evolution that we're seeing? And then we'll talk a little bit more about Red specifically and what it's bringing to the table.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think kind of the principal value add of buying ads in a digital environment is being able to have some sort of identity and attribution to say, I spent this money and I generated this business result. And for a long time, that was kind of just based right off of browser-based cookies and pixels on the site, I think that's still probably a pretty valuable and pretty widely spread used solution across different verticals and industries. But kind of where this has started to develop a little further is that different modes of identifiers are entering those workflows, right? So I work at the trade desk. We have our unified ID 2 specific identifier, which is based off of hashed emails. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about how that is applicable. And I think the nice thing about using a deterministic identifier like that is tied so nicely to something like an email address is it's very interoperable with a lot of your existing CDP integrations today and works very well with conversion-based APIs. So if we were to go back and talk about the travel example for a minute, even if you're not on the website, you're probably still tying your booking confirmation back to an email address that sends you the reservation details, things about your upcoming stay or upcoming travel. And being able to take that email address that lives in your brand CRM and upload that into a platform as an identifier for bidding and for audience creation, as well as conversion analysis, I think is a real game changer in the space.
Yeah, and you had mentioned conversion analysis specifically, and we've seen a lot of adoption with those conversion APIs. I think Trade Desk refers to it more as an event API, right? But I think maybe that's a helpful place to sort of discriminate between what's a conversion API, what conversion API might do for a customer, and then what something like Reds might do for a customer, right? Because those conversion APIs, while they're super valuable in terms of being able to, as you said, sort of attribute a conversion to a campaign, inherently the analysis that you're receiving there about ROAS or cost per click, et cetera, that's happening predominantly in a platform outside of your four walls. So great for campaign level analysis, great for also like optimizing that campaign in flight. But let's talk a little bit more about where Reds goes further, which is could kind of take us to that impression level, one-to-one picture. And Anthony, I'm realizing we've gone way into the weeds here, and I feel like I should take a step back. And could you give me the explain to me like I'm five version of what is Trade Desk raw event data stream? Like, what are we getting with that feed?
Yeah, yeah, and you kind of hit on it, but raw event data stream, or REDS, because we love acronyms in this industry,
Okay.
are kind of like four separate log level entries covering impressions, clicks, video events, and conversions. And by log level, we mean literally every time an event in one of those categories happens, we're going to timestamp it. We're going to assign certain information about that that can then be mapped back to describe certain events about how the impression happened or how the conversion happened. And maybe it kind of tees up the logical extension of this of like, who is converting within those raw event data streams and what information we can extract from there.
Got you. And I tell you what, I don't want to assume anything. So let's just talk real quickly too about something you mentioned earlier that's kind of a part of this technology stack, and that is UID 2.0. Tell
Yeah,
me a bit more about what that is, and I'll of course talk about how Amperity interacts with that service and lets our customers set up and have their UID ID graph.
yeah, absolutely. So UID 2.0 is one of many digital identifiers that you can use to construct audiences and that are integrated with publishers across a multitude of different channels in order to kind of tie back I mentioned there was a hashed email based identifier, tie that hashed email across all of your different publisher and audience workflows and use them in conjunction with other IDs in the space, whether it's you mentioned cookies, device IDs, things like a ramp ID. These are all kind of constructed into this concept of a cross-device identity graph, which is taking, the 20 to 30 different identifiers that maybe belong to you, Marcus, whether it's your laptop, your connected TV, your login-based emails for something like a Hulu or a Peacock, and saying that those IDs all belong to Marcus. It could be a UID2, it could be a device ID, it could be a third-party cookie. But I think where UID2 is really interesting is that it is kind of tied back to that deterministic and also privacy safe data source with your hashed email. And as we'll talk about with kind of Amperity's work stream, you're able to kind of like control that hashing and encryption into a UID2 directly as the brand.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, it's kind of, it almost lets you act as sort of your own onboarder, because
Yeah.
what I'm thinking about in my mind is I'm imagining, our customers build their first party identity graph, right, about people, right? And then they have access via the trade desk, right, to the ability to extend that to all the identifiers that might be associated with those people. And then maybe when we get into the platform, you can help explain a little more about originating ID and where that all comes to bear in this stream. But the people are probably tired of looking at our faces. So why don't we get into the platform, kind of share, exactly what this looks like. And I'm going to start in a place that's going to be pretty familiar for those of you on the phone that are impaired, or on the phone. What year is it? On the call that are Amperity customers, right? And this is for those of you who aren't working with Amperity today. This is our customer 360 view, is a basic example thereof. But the reason I bring this up is obviously, when we're building campaigns, audiences to target on the trade desk, it all starts with who do we want to target. And I want to build that one foundational piece that's really important for anything we're doing with targeting audiences on the trade desk, or bringing that Reds data feed back into Amperity with a little help from our friends at Databricks to make the data more meaningful. And that is this linkage to the UID. And without getting too deep into the technology here, this is something that if you're an Amperity customer, you can have this linked at the customer 360 level to every person in your customer 360 with an email address, right? And so what this enables us to do is, one, now we have that privacy safe anonymous ID that we can exchange data with the trade desk against. But then also it's going to allow us to take everything we get back in that raw event data stream, associated to all the transactions, all the interactions, all the email engagements, everything else that's going on within Amperity, and understand where it fits into that customer lifecycle. So let's talk about a day in the life. Let's talk about how you would actually use this capability. Right. Let's say that we're running a campaign, and Anthony, you brought up travel. So I'm going to stick with that. Right. Let's say that we're taking everybody that stayed with us within the last 14 days, and we're running a basic campaign. And for those of you that aren't Amperity customers, we're focused today on how we actually execute these campaigns. But what you saw just a moment ago is our audience builder. You have that ability to build audiences visually in the platform, without necessarily having a lot of familiarity with the data. But I'm going to go ahead and take that welcome stay campaign that we had created there. We're going to include that in our campaign targeting here at Amperity. Amperity knows when I'm sending data to the trade desk wants to receive UIDs. So it's doing that logic of formatting the delivery to the trade desk appropriately, pre-selecting the UID field, etc. And so we're going to kick this campaign off, and we're going to do a couple things here with the data as it starts to come back. So let's say we've been running our campaign for a moment, and I want to start with the big picture, and then we're going to get a little bit more granular about what we can get back from the trade desk and how we can associate that to every one of your profiles to help you make decisions both in flight as well as building out that customer profile. So the first step, or rather the most important step in terms of being able to visualize all of this, is that we bring this data together. And I mentioned Databricks previously. So either with our customers' Databricks or within our Databricks environment, we apply some of your business rules about, Anthony mentioned last touch attribution. Some customers may have a multi-touch attribution strategy. Some customers, we can consult with you on the best way to look at that. If we start to build that raw data into very useful and meaningful visualizations in terms of how am I seeing performance across all of my campaigns. But what gets really exciting here is when we start to use the granularity of that data to see not just what things look like across campaigns or even within a campaign, but start to understand within those campaigns, where is my conversion happening and what could I attribute previously? And what am I now able to attribute through the use of Amperity with the trade desk, and whether that's CAPI or also Reds. And we'll talk about the difference there. Because what you're seeing now as I click into this top campaign screen is that welcome stay campaign that I shot out. I'm seeing a decent amount of revenue, let's say online, attributed to that. And think of this as revenue I would have seen otherwise. But there's this big offline revenue category. And Anthony kind of alluded to this, right? I might see an ad on the trade desk and then mere moments later call in or pull out my app and make a booking, or even go to a site that's not somewhere that's natively within my owned and operated properties. Anthony, I saw you coming off a mute there. I wonder if you have something to drop in as we're talking through this.
Yeah, I just think this is like so important, right? Because if we were to just think about it through, we set the stage of a traditional marketing lens and something like pixel based, which I know a lot of clients are activating on a day-to-day basis and maybe don't have that same visibility into what happens off the site. Here, I mean, the discrepancies are pretty staggering, but we're missing out on over like in this example 2.3, 2.5 million in unattributed sales. And I'm just thinking like if I were a marketer, if I were a brand, or if I were an agency partner, I would want to be credited for every single conversion that I'm driving as a part of my initiative. So this kind of seems like a layup for something to be building towards in the future, if I'm not already.
Yeah, absolutely. And we started planning this campaign during March Madness. Obviously, we still got basketball in the brain with the layup metaphor, but that's such a good point because I can think of so many dimensions here, not just in terms of how I'm going to optimize and use this campaign. Heck, think about being able to now, I hate to say this in front of the trade desk, but remove people from this campaign and then optimize your spend, right, on other campaigns that might be more profitable for you. Make sure I'm not getting that experience where I see the ad for the destination that I've just booked or for the product that I've just purchased. And then it goes a layer deeper too, right? Beyond the campaign layer, I can start to understand of those cohorts that I'm building in Amperity, which of those audiences are performing, regardless which campaign I'm using them within. And then to even reach a step beyond Amperity into our creative departments and understanding, what's really resonating with customers. Understanding if I'm optimizing based off of that creative, which of those is actually converting. And it looks like, predictably, a lot of people thinking about headed to the beach here soon. Now, this is how we look at things in terms of an aggregate perspective, right? And Amperity customers are getting a really unique benefit here in that through the use of our platform, they're attributing a lot more of those transactions to a known user and therefore to the campaign that user was in. But let's talk about kind of how that process happens, because not only does the data not quite look like this when it arrives from the trade desk, but the granularity of that data unlocks a few things that I want people to start thinking about in terms of what it might unlock in terms of customer profiling, customer data journeys, in terms of looking at things from a cross-channel perspective. But before I go on to talking about kind of how this works behind the scenes, Anthony, anything else to add?
Yeah, I think it's just important to note, right, that this type of conversion data is great and so helpful within Amperity's platform and also within your buying platform specifically. So I think like Marcus mentioned, our offline conversions API, you can send this data to our platform as well to kind of not only understand which audiences you want to be sending into the platform based off of your data for modeling and segmentation, but also for optimization real time while the campaign is performing, so we can get more conversion signals driving our algorithms. And I think that the great thing too about these different integrations with Amperity is we have the ability to send through additional information. As Marcus kind of mentioned, if there's a specific propensity to collect bookings in beach towns, we can pass back via dynamic parameters, things like the city that the checkout or booking was made in, and kind of model audiences specifically based off of that. So there's a lot of customization and opportunities beyond just tracking whether a sale did or didn't happen to kind of provide more information for us to activate new audiences or new strategies.
I love it. I love it. So let's get into real quickly how this all comes together, as well as some of the things beyond just kind of visualizations and reportings that might unlock. If you remember when we first started with the customer profile, we noted that every Amperity customer profile is going to have a UID associated with it because we're maintaining that, let's say, first party ID graph for each of our customers, right? And this is kind of why we want to do that, because what you're seeing now is the raw. And I'm going to click over so you can see just the volume that comes in, etc. But this is the raw feed that comes in from raw event data stream. And there's so much valuable data within this stream, and I'll scroll as slowly as possible so that our GoToWebinar won't blur on you. But the important thing to note is I'm getting information about what campaign, what creative, where the ad was delivered, that device level data. For those of you who have been, in the measurement space for a long time, this is a granularity of data we've sort of lost over the years that we're coming back to. But I'm going to pause here to where we get to the combined identifier column, and I'm seeing this raw UID2 piece. I kind of know what's going on here, but Anthony, maybe give me a little bit more idea of when I see originating, what does that mean? And then we'll talk through how this now bridges into actually using this data at the profile level.
Yeah, so maybe some history here, just if you're familiar with our raw events data stream from a couple of years back. This combined identifier field didn't always exist. We used to really only pass back TD-IDs and device IDs. TD-IDs are kind of like trade desk graph IDs, for lack of a better term. And the problem with that, or the problem with any real identifier inherently, is that I have no idea what device ID 1234 corresponds to, right? It could be anyone. Like I don't really have a mapping key for that. And so to solve for this, we introduced this combined identifier schema, which takes this with originating ID enabled, takes the ID that was uploaded into the platform that appears first in bidding and returns it each time that that user level person or household is recorded in our raw event data stream. So I mentioned cross device. The great thing about the trade desk when you're trying to scale these audiences is if you send an audience completely comprised of UIDs, but we're able to find an overlap in our identity graph with a UID and a device ID, and the device ID is the one being used in the bid request from a publisher, we can transact on that device ID because we know there's an identity match between the UID. But then using this combined identifier field, we don't return the device ID, we return the raw UID too. And so I think that's a pretty big game changer because we start to understand when we talk about, moving away from last touch attribution and like what is happening at every single touch point along the conversion user journey, we can see that reflected in raw event data stream. And then because we're returning a UID to in reds, like we as the trade desk don't know that this crazy hash gibberish combined identifier corresponds to Anthony@gmail.com, but the brand who holds those encryption keys and holds that first party data is then able to transcribe that back into their customer data platform for further conversion and audience based analysis.
That's huge. That's huge. So, and I think the profile I shared earlier, right? So now, like, if you think about being able to go from the understanding of what Monty here in this case has purchased, every email we've sent her, and now to add in, unfortunately, we've only shown her one impression. So I might want to go out and target people to look like Monty a little more aggressively to convert, right? But now we can add this into the data stream with every individual behavior, transaction, anything that's coming through in terms of Monty. So this dashboard and some of the examples we showed here from a transactional perspective, this is really just the beginning. The sky's kind of the limit here. You may have seen some really esoteric things in that data, such as I think there's data about like the temperature at the point of delivery or something like that where available. And so you can bring in a lot of dimensions of data depending upon what specifically is relevant in your industry and within your business. So that's what we wanted to show from a platform perspective today. I'm going to drop out of the platform because Anthony, I wanted to kind of wrap up with a few additional questions. We sort of hinted to it. I sort of like kind of opened us up a little bit there. What are we seeing? Maybe if you've got a customer story that's top of mind, that with customers using this REDS data to kind of refine their targeting to improve on kind of their budget allocation. I've got a shared customer in mind, the travel customer we've sort of alluded to, that really was able to kind of, as you would imagine, attribute so much more of that offline revenue back to their campaigns and make decisions based on that. But what's coming to mind for you?
Yeah, I think that it really comes down to changing the audience activation narrative when you think about what's performing well from an on-site versus an off-site audience activation, and using a platform like Amperity to kind of quantify all of those sales that a traditional pixel isn't able to pick up on. You start to understand more about like which audiences are truly driving value for the brand, and I think it's kind of surface some new insights and some new ways to think about audiences in relation to the value they're driving. And then I think we've also alluded to this a little further, but I think it's also rethinking your measurement and optimization strategies and thinking about like, while the pixel is certainly an important and very vital part of a measurement strategy, there's all of this additional data sitting here that is driving value for the brand that's generated directly by our programmatic investment. And we need to use something like the offline conversions API to bring that offline conversion data that sits outside of that pixel-based attribution into the platform to make our buying models smarter and demonstrate just higher revenue and ROAS ceilings.
Right on. Makes sense. So, all right. The question that I mean, I know we're kind of in the tech weeds here, but there's hopefully a few people on the call that are thinking, okay, I'm an Amperity customer, or I'm a Trade Desk customer. Like, how do I get started with this? Right. So I guess I'll ask you, like, if somebody's a Trade Desk customer, wants to be a Trade Desk customer, yeah, how do they get started with Reds? How do they start activating kind of what we've seen today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the total cop out answer, but reach out to your account manager. We'd love to engage further with you and kind of understand about what your specific data needs are and how we could get that activated for you. But yeah, it really does come down to reaching out to your client services team. We'd be happy to work directly with you. So, and then I guess like I'll turn it back on you. If an Amperity customer wants to start using Reds, how would they go about doing that?
Got it. Well, okay, yeah, we're parroting each other. So because the answer is the same, right?
Yeah.
Reach out to your customer success manager here at Amperity. But yeah, same situation here. I mean, and there's just so much you can unlock with this integration, and of course, can't stress enough that this is relatively straightforward to get going from both a contractual and tech perspective to the point where you could be activating and measuring your audiences relatively quickly. Um, I think that's what we had for planned content. Looking through some of the questions that are coming in, Anthony, we sort of alluded to conversion data a couple times, and there's a kind of follow-up question around that. And I think this could be helpful for everyone is, maybe helping what specifically when we talk about sending that conversion data via conversion API, what specifically is Trade Desk doing with that data? You mentioned optimization. We talked about reporting. Maybe we could just kind of double click on that with keeping in mind that that can exist, both coexist as well as be separate from using this Reds data within your own environment. So speaking specific to those conversion APIs.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think one important facet of this is thinking about how you want to categorize your conversion data and if there's any additional descriptors. I mentioned this workflow of dynamic parameters, and I think it's a really important one to think about what additional information you want to send through, right? And this could be as simple as just the revenue associated with a purchase. So like, do we want to quantify a high value or a lifetime value associated with a specific user agent or conversion? Or do we want to, if you have multiple brands under your umbrella, maybe it's a good way to delineate bookings for one brand versus another, or it's a good way to talk about what type of product your brand is, if your brand is selling, if it was like a CPG brand or something like that. So I think being able to classify that data and then make sure that you're pushing it both to the offline conversions API, which will be great for real-time optimization, real-time reporting, so that your sophisticated buying team can go in addition with our platform optimization levers that are more automated, the buying teams can make informed decisions about all their traffic and conversion data that they're driving both online and offline. I think that's a huge part of it. And then also being able to send that for audience activation, whether it's, excluding past purchasers if you have like a longer purchase cycle and maybe a less frequent purchase cycle, or reaching out to people that are maybe mid funnel, bringing them closer to down funnel into the conversion
Makes
window,
sense.
or segmenting for modeling and lookalikes.
Got it. Well, I know we're kind of running out of time. We did have one last question that just speaks to something I did want to make sure we spoke about, and that is how can this data be used? And I'll take this one from an Amperity standpoint to drive more intelligent segmentation, et cetera. Great question because we focused on measurement today. We focused on sort of attribution, but you're right. As soon as that data is in the platform, it unlocks a lot of new things. For those of you who've been in the advertising world for a while, think about cross-channel reach and frequency management. Now I can actually see how many times has somebody seen my campaign, how many times has an impression been delivered. Do I want to manage that a little bit more carefully across my own channels as well as paid channels? So just to plant some of those seeds in your head, how could you even use the data I showed you with those impressions being at the customer level to then start building new segments, using those as exclusions, inclusions in your existing segments, and things like that. So I think we're a moment over time. So I'm sorry if we weren't able to get into your questions today. We will follow up with you directly, or of course, reach out to make sure. Thanks so much to anyone who's joined us live. If you're watching this as a recording, thanks as well. Thanks very much to Anthony from the trade desk. As we mentioned, if you want a bit more of a personalized demo or further discussions on this and how you can use UID 2.0 and REDS, you can reach out to us, hello, the word hello, at amperity.com. Or to your existing relationships with your account team at either Amperity or the trade desk. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you have a fantastic week.
Thanks so much.
Cheers.